The first time I stepped onto the white ocean liner, I thought it was a floating city. Marble floors gleamed under chandeliers, the air was perfumed with champagne and salt, and laughter echoed in every corridor. My family's cabin was in the mid-deck F208. 2 doors down, in F210, was the cabin that would later become the source of nightmares I still can't erase. It was our 3rd night at sea. The ocean had been restless that evening, waves hammering the hull so hard that the furniture rattled against the walls. I was half asleep, lulled by the low groan of the engines, when I heard a tall man's voice, sharp and rising in pitch. "Stop mocking me, thou. You think this is a joke?" The walls on cruise ships are deceptively thin. Every word came through, clear as if the couple were arguing in my own room. Then came the woman's voice, low but edged with fury. "Calm down, please. The children." A loud crash silenced her. I froze, heart pounding. The next sound was something that didn't belong on a vacation ship. A wet thud, then a scream, so piercing that every hair on my body stood upright. The hallway outside exploded with commotion, footsteps, radios, the metallic jangle of keys. I cracked open my door. Security officers rushed past, their faces set in grim urgency. Cabin F210's door burst open under their knock. What spilled into the corridor is an image I cannot forget. A man stumbled out later. I would learn his name was Mr. Turnus, white shirt soaked red, hands trembling as if he couldn't wash off what he'd done. His eyes were glassy, and his lips moved as though reciting a prayer. I leaned forward and heard him whisper, over and over, "She laughed at me. She laughed at me." Inside the cabin, the scene was worse than any nightmare. Mrs. Dow lay on the floor, her head twisted at an angle no living person could hold, the carpet beneath her blooming with blood. 2 children, no older than 10, cowered in the corner, their small bodies pressed together, their cries muffled by their own trembling hands. I had seen accidents before, cuts, broken bones, drunken falls. But this wasn't an accident. It was rage given flesh. The captain's voice soon echoed over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, for your safety, please remain in your cabins." His words were calm, but no one could mistake the tremor beneath them. We docked at the nearest port the next morning, a hurried diversion to Nassau. FBI agents came aboard, their dark suits so out of place against the bright holiday colors. They questioned passengers, sealed off the hallway, and wheeled out a body bag that seemed to drain all warmth from the air as it passed. But what lingers with me is not the investigation, it's what came after. Cruise staff cleaned cabin F210 relentlessly. Bleach, steam, fresh carpeting, yet every time I walked past, I swore I could see a faint discoloration in the fibers, as though the blood had tattooed itself into the ship. The air there always smelled faintly metallic, no matter how many perfumed sprays they used. That night, I lay awake, listening to the hum of the engines. When I heard it again, a muffled voice, a woman's sob, then the heavy thump, the same one I had heard before. I bolted upright. My family slept soundly beside me, unaware. I crept to the door and pressed my ear to the wall that separated our cabin from F210. Silence, only the faint creak of the ship shifting in the water. The rational part of me said it was just memory, my mind replaying what had already happened. But it didn't feel like memory. It felt alive, repeating itself on the other side of that wall. Over the next few days, other passengers whispered. Some claimed to hear footsteps pacing the sealed cabin. Others swore they heard a woman humming softly in the corridor late at night. Security brushed it off as imagination stirred by tragedy, but I saw the look in their eyes. They were scared too. On the final night of the cruise, I made the mistake of walking past F210 alone. The corridor was deserted, the carpet freshly vacuumed, the lights buzzing faintly overhead. Then I heard it, a child's voice, soft and broken. "Mama, wake up." I stopped dead, my pulse slamming in my throat. The door to F210 was sealed with yellow tape. No one could be inside. Yet the sobbing continued, quiet and desperate, until it faded into the hum of the engines. I ran back to my cabin, locked the door, and waited for daylight. Even after returning home, the ship has never left me. I see it in dreams, the gleaming hallways, the endless sea, and always cabin F210, sometimes in the silence of night, when the house is still. I hear the thump again, reverberating through the walls, as if the white ocean liner is calling me back. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to the bone, that some horrors do not end with death. They linger, trapped in steel and salt water, waiting for the next passenger to listen through the thin walls. When I booked the Moonlight Voyager out of Singapore, I imagined 7 nights of peace. No deadlines, no city noise, just the sea and the illusion of anonymity among strangers. Traveling alone felt liberating. For the first 2 days, I spent mornings at the buffet, afternoons on deck, evenings in the theater. No one knew my name, and I relished the freedom until I noticed him. The first time was small enough to dismiss. A man in a gray t-shirt, standing across the dining hall. Strong build, dark beard, a baseball cap pulled low. He wasn't eating, just watching. His eyes fixed on me, with the intensity of someone memorizing every detail. I forced a smile, as travelers sometimes do, but he didn't return it. The second time was harder to ignore. During a yoga class on deck, I bent forward, lifted my head, and saw him leaning against the rail. Same shirt, same cap, same unblinking stare. By the third day, it wasn't coincidence anymore. He appeared everywhere: the theater balcony, the casino bar, even in the mirrored hallway outside my cabin. Once, late at night, I stepped onto my balcony for air. The ocean stretched black and endless, but when I looked down, I saw him again, standing on a lower deck reserved for crew. He tilted his head back, as if he knew I'd come out. Panic nod at me. I went to security. There's a man following me, I told the officer at the desk. I gave them every detail: gray shirt, beard, cap. He was on the crew deck. He's everywhere I go. They checked the cameras. After an hour, the officer returned, brows furrowed. We've reviewed the footage. There's no one matching that description. No one. My voice cracked. He's been right in front of me. Ma'am, we've checked dining, theater, and deck feeds. Nothing. I left with a hollow reassurance and a suggestion to relax and enjoy the cruise. But the following night, he came closer. I had just returned from dinner. The hallway unusually silent. The hum of the engines deep in my bones. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and froze. The balcony curtains were open. The glass door slid an inch ajar, and then he stepped through. The man in gray, emerging from the balcony next to mine, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He filled the doorway, shoulders wide, shadow blotting out the glow of the ship's lights. His cap tilted up just enough for me to see his eyes cold, flat, and intent. I couldn't breathe. My phone slipped from my hand. "Who are you?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He only smiled, the corners of his mouth twitching like a cruel secret. I ran for the door, fumbling with the lock, and shouted into the corridor. Within seconds, 2 security officers arrived, flashlights cutting through the cabin. They searched every corner, pulled back the curtains, checked the balcony. Nothing. The couple in the cabin, next to mine, an elderly pair with walkers, opened their door in confusion. They insisted they hadn't seen or heard a thing. The officers exchanged glances. One knelt and picked up my phone from the floor. "Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" But I wasn't. I knew what I saw. Sleep became impossible after that. Every creak of the ship, every knock of a wave against the hull, sounded like footsteps approaching my door. Sometimes I thought I saw him in the crowd, always at the edge of vision, on the staircase, by the pool, reflected faintly in a window pane. On the final morning, as passengers lined up to disembark, I convinced myself it was over. I had made it through. Maybe the ocean air and sleepless nights had twisted my imagination. Maybe the man never existed. And then, as I stepped onto the gangway, I looked back. There he was, standing at the rail of the ship, cap pulled low, gray shirt fluttering in the breeze. He raised one hand and waved, a casual, mocking gesture. I blinked, and he was gone. When security later offered me a voucher for another cruise, I refused. The thought of setting foot on another ship made my stomach twist. Even now, on quiet nights in my apartment, I sometimes catch a glimpse of movement in the glass of my balcony door, a shadow where no one should stand. And I remember his smile, that cruel hint of possession, as though I hadn't escaped at all, as though the sea had delivered him not just to the ship, but to me. I signed on to the Min show as a junior safety officer, eager to prove myself. The ship wasn't the grandest liner, but it carried 2,000 passengers across the South Pacific with the same promise as all cruise vessels: relaxation, indulgence, safety. That last word was my responsibility. On the fifth night, during a poolside party, my radio crackled with a report. Possible missing passenger, male, 20s. Last seen near deck 12 rail. The name came a moment later. Alec Turn. I hurried to the deck. Music still blared, neon lights reflecting off the water in the pool, passengers laughing with drinks in hand. The world looked normal. But at the rail, a friend of Lack's pointed with shaking fingers. He was right here, drunk, leaning too far over. It was 10:48 p.m., according to the cameras. They showed Alec swaying, a bottle in his hand, staring at the waves. But then, nothing. He wasn't seen falling. He wasn't seen leaving. He simply vanished between one frame and the next. Protocol demanded a search of the ship. His key history was pulled. That's when the story bent from tragic to impossible. At 10:55 p.m., 7 minutes after he was last seen on deck 12, Lack's keycard was swiped in engineering. Deck 2, an area off limits to passengers. I was dispatched to investigate. The corridor there smelled of oil and seawater, the hum of the engines vibrating through the steel walls. The camera that should have covered the door showed only static for exactly 3 minutes, beginning the moment his card was swiped. Inside, we found a towel streaked with blood shoved behind a pipe, a locker forced open, its contents scattered. Missing, a pair of coveralls and a set of bolt cutters. My stomach twisted. If Elek had come here, someone had helped him or forced him. At 11:19 p.m., the card was used again at a service elevator. The footage there was no better. The frame glitched, freezing into a distorted smear of light. But in one still moment, I caught it behind the blur. The outline of a tall figure in dark clothing, half turned toward the camera. No face, just a presence. Minutes later, the card was discovered on the floor of deck 3, by a vent that led to a shell door opening directly to the sea. The vent grill bore fresh pry marks. The door itself gaped slightly, the night air howling through. We alerted the captain. Searchlights swept the waves. A call went out to the Coast Guard, but the sea had already claimed its silence. By dawn, the official line was clear: passenger presumed overboard due to intoxication. But I couldn't accept it. I replayed the footage again and again. The cameras glitched only when the keycard was used. The figure appeared only once, blurred, impossible, but undeniably there. My report noted the anomalies. Hours later, it returned. From the captain's office, stripped bare, rewritten into neat, sterile words. Malfunction, operator, error, passenger, intoxicated. It was a lie, and I knew it. In the days that followed, whispers spread among crew. Some swore they'd seen a man in dark overalls moving through restricted corridors, though no such crew member was logged. One engineer told me he woke one night to the sound of bolt cutters clattering in the passageway outside his bunk, but when he opened the door, the hall was empty. I started avoiding deck 2, but sometimes the smell of salt and rust would drift up into my cabin, and I'd hear the faintest rattle of tools. Once, walking past the locked shell door, I thought I heard someone breathing inside the vent, slow and deliberate, waiting. When the cruise ended, passengers departed with suntans and photo albums. I disembarked with a different souvenir, a memory that gnawed at me every night, because, in the final security sweep, I returned to deck 2 one last time. The static-filled camera had been repaired, recording smoothly again, and as I passed, I glanced at the monitor. There, in the corner of the frame, a tall figure in dark clothes stood at the far end of the corridor, motionless, watching. I spun around. The corridor was empty. When I looked back at the monitor, so was the feed. Elec was never found. The report insists he fell, drunk and careless, into the ocean's endless hunger. But I know better. Something walked those corridors with him that night. Something that tampered with cameras, that moved unseen, that led him to the door where the sea waited. And if it could happen once, it could happen again. Sometimes I dream of being back on that ship, the hum of engines around me, the corridor, stretching long and dim. I dream of a man standing at the end of it, faceless in the dark, waiting for me to take the same steps Elec did. And when I wake, heart hammering, the sound of the ocean is still in my ears, as though the sea has not finished its claim.